I actually wanted to give a presentation to convince you of the psychometric validity of item level data. But then I realized it's the first presentation after lunch, and that might have been undigestible for you. And so I decided to rather talk something that is very near and dear to my heart. My background is actually not psychometrics. It's really data visualization, and really coming at it more from a human-computer interaction side. And so I have to tell you that actually your data is irrelevant. That's typically when I'm being led off the stage. This saves people also a lot of time. But it's irrelevant if the customer, whoever the customer might be, cannot derive insight. And Ben Glaser introduced this term of insight first, and then a lot of people talked about it. And it's really important to keep that in mind in order to really justify what we are all doing and to do it better and to have a bigger impact around that. Data is our core, so I want to use also this opportunity for people to understand what companies like ACT are actually doing. Often we are the ACT test, but we are so much more than that. And if you look at this graph here, we actually have assessment about people's abilities and potential now from grade 3 all the way into the workforce. And it's not only achievement data, so kind of what they learn, but it's interest inventory, what they're interested in, what they aspire for, and it's behavioral data. So it's a little more things like things that we would call soft skills in business, those types of things. And not all of it is connected yet, but a lot of it is. And we are assessing many, many people, so we can actually go into aggregation and look at large amounts of data. Some of our products have actually the broadest use of any of those related products. If you just look at the interest inventories, where by now like 130 million people have taken those interest inventories. So it's a lot of data. There's also a lot of great good research coming from ACT that I think is still being underutilized. So if you are interested in all this reporting that we do around the state of the nation, around education, all that is free information in the forms of reports. We see ourselves as a public trust that wants to share this data if we are allowed to do that. And so we're trying to work towards really making an impact with this data. Just to give you a little bit an idea of how we work, so we don't invent those scores, right, and how we measure them. We actually start with a National Career Readiness Survey where we ask educators in high school and in college of what they think students should know when they transition from high school into college. This is how we come up with our assessments and our scores. And this is specifically for the ACT test, not for other types of assessment. And we are looking at really with analytics at what can we measure and how well can we measure it, and what is the statistical predictability. For the ACT test, it's about the potential of success for the first year in college. That's another thing that people often don't understand or don't want to understand. We do not predict with the ACT test success throughout college or life success or those types of things, right? The predictability here is around the first year in college. That's all we can measure. We also think about how do we accommodate differently abled people, and how do we make sure that those accommodations don't impact the statistical validity of the type of assessments that we have. So there's a lot of this type of research going on in what we are doing. And we're comparing things to also detect outliers and things that don't go wrong, don't go right, so that we know, whether certain types of assessments have been, tampered with, are actually reflective of somebody's achievement or not. And we can then also, create the reports based on the data of where are the differences in the nations, whether it's on the district level or an individual level, on the state level, what are the differences, and what should really society know about our school system as assessed by our assessment and as reflected in our data. So just to give you a little bit an idea, if you didn't know that yet, of what companies like ACT are doing. We also do school district comparison to see, you know, are there, and we saw some of those examples earlier on, are there certain schools that are, everything else being equal, outperforming others, so that maybe we could learn from them? Or there's something going on, if they underperform others, that we have to check into those types of things. And Kathleen is not here anymore. I want to make sure that I have a black bar there showing that, you know, we are very, very sensitive to privacy, not only of individuals, but also of school systems that don't want others to know how they are performing. And then we do a lot of impact studies that we are then reporting out, and I showed the link earlier on, and you know, in the slides that we will share then, you can check out this type of research. So this is just to give you an idea what type of data we are talking about, the scope of the data, the scale of the data. But as I mentioned earlier, the purpose of computation is insights, not numbers. And so the question is really, what is an insight? We're throwing it around, and you know, it's like, okay, it's a little bit more than data, a little bit less than a decision, somewhere in between. And I always like to use this DIKW pyramid that many of you might be familiar with. And I use that also with my students a lot, so that they actually differentiate between the different levels of data and knowledge that we are dealing with, and the different implications that go along with each of those levels. And insight is this little thing here that helps us actually take something we collected and understood from the past and make it actionable for the future. So insight is always associated with action, with something we do about it, and something that is very contextualized, and that's important, because context has to be created more often than not by the individuals affected. Otherwise, it can't drive action. Many times, we position ourselves as the data experts, and then we tell people what to do. We give them guidance. The problem with this is it's not contextualized enough for them, and therefore it's not relevant. And that's important to understand, and that's why we think that literacy is an important aspect to look at. So here another definition that I picked up somewhere that I liked a lot. There are many other definitions out there. From my perspective, any definition is better than no definition. And it's the sudden grasp of new relationships that are necessary to solve a problem and that were not learned in the past. So it's not a lot of the confirmatory stuff we are doing to just show that, you know, nothing changed from what we knew before. It is associated with, again, I think it was Ben Glasser that said, the surprise that we always require in order to drive action, because it's the sudden grasp of something new. And again, if we're using data for that, it kind of implies that we have to give some control to the individual analyst, even if they don't have a degree in analysis, so that they can be constantly and continuously surprised. So where's the insight here? This is a case from our data. We are doing score reporting within certain scales and with certain benchmarks, and immediately everybody jumps to, you know, this student should improve in writing because that's the lowest apparent value here. But the truth is actually the student should improve in math. And it's this type of really making it easy for people to not get to the wrong conclusion, which will be very important in order to involve broader audiences that don't have a scientific or an analytic background into the conversation. Because they don't care that actually our benchmarks are different, right, as on the left. That's not important to them. For them, they want to know what is in the data that I can act upon. And that's not about the benchmark, that's about the scores relative to the benchmark. Kathleen Stiles said something that struck a chord in me. Who has a senior here in high school right now and dealing with the college system? Yeah, me too. And you know, she said something about, you know, there's so much we're getting out of failure, so she doesn't want people to preclude students from failure. Where we're here in the US, and learning from failure is very important, but we don't have the luxury, really, to fail if we go through the college system, except if you're very wealthy, because it costs money to go to higher education here. And so I rather go in an informed way into that risk of failing than for it to be a surprise and then derailing a lot of students. And here are just some numbers to kind of emphasize what I'm saying. It is a national problem that so many students are failing. And it has huge economic implications for the individuals, for their families, and for the economy. And with the data we have, we can actually inform much better decisions so that we minimize the risk of failure and give people a choice of whether they actually want to take the risk or not. So everything I just said kind of leads to the conclusion. Everything is really, when you talk about insight, it's about data-driven decision making. And when you talk about this, there are three fundamental challenges that I see. And those have to do with data access. We all know how hard it is to get our hands on good data, how to share data, all those types of things, data analysis, and the communication of results. And now we want to broaden the scope of who can actually make data-driven decisions, right? We're saying it's not only the experts and the administrators, it's individuals, it's their parents, it's their teachers, it's counselors, etc. So, but what does that mean? Well, who has good data access? Bless you. It's typically in an institution, it's IT and some researchers and scientists that have found a way to access the data. Pretty much nobody else. Who's good at data analytics, really? It's data scientists. It's researchers, scientists. And you see all the others that we think should also be involved in the process and have a big chance. I put 2 plugs for you in already, and you weren't here. Come on in. Ben Glaser. And who's good at communication? If we think about data analysis being on the one hand kind of the interpretation of data, on the other hand the effective communication of the data to the decision makers, well, in our case it's some communicators, maybe some counselors, some policymakers, and I'm generalizing here. There are always a few in the mix that also do better than others, but in general we really have a challenge here. And you could say, well, but we can communicate all this data out in a broad sense, you know, and we look at the media, they're reporting so many numbers. But there's a big problem with this type of data communication as well, right? Reports are very generalized, are not really actionable for individuals. If you, in the process of trying to make a decision, a student talks to their parents or peers, it's very subjective and out of the context of the individual. If you look at traditional media, there's a lot of sensation around any type of data, and it's not well informed, and we know all the infographics out there that have a political agenda and not really show all the data and are trying actually often to persuade with data. And you know, in general, on the internet, the data is incomplete, inaccurate, and overwhelming, and often just helps you to confirm what you know already. Certain demographics underperform other demographics, and you know, that's how it was last year, that's how it was 5 years ago, and it just got worse. Well, you know, it's not really actionable, right? So what we are really, and we saw a desert picture earlier on already from our friends from Pearson, you know, we are in a desert when it comes to analytical skills among a broad population. And all we see in the distance is kind of this fata morgana of data that is reported to us in aggregation through public media. And that is a big challenge to really make good use of this data and to have an impact. And so we identified a need for analytics democratization. We heard that also earlier on already, the aspect of democratization. I think our Tableau talked about that. But it's not only access to data. That would be too easy. And that's already a big problem. We know all that. It's also the literacy around data. That's democratization. Okay, and there's a lot of work we need to do so that all those stakeholders can actually contextualize data and be empowered to make their own decisions and choices based on the data. Good luck with that. So, why is this important? Why don't we just maintain the expert culture where we tell people what to do? Well, there's all kinds of great stuff going on there that's being reported here, like by the Horizons report. This is all dated 2011 because that's when we started our initiative, and already then they were saying, there is the need for formal instruction in key new skills, including information literacy, visual literacy, and technological literacy, and it poses a continuing challenge to educational programs. On the workforce, you saw our spectrum, so we are concerned from grade 3 all the way into the workforce, right? A McKinsey report stated that by 2018, we will face a shortage of 1.5 million managers who can use data to shape business decisions. And on the other hand, we are all kind of talking about big data and more big data and bigger data, and good luck with that if we don't have the people out there that make effective use of that. K through 12 or 7, the Common Core State Standard poses that certain things should be taught, like analysis and synthesis, and therefore for companies like ours, we need to assess them. We're being asked to assess stuff that's not being taught yet. Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, yes. So this is our customer. It's a funny story. So I hired actually for the Office for Innovation a communication person, and she said, I only work with you if on any presentation I do for you, I can put a picture of a kitten in there. Okay, so this is my plug for her. So interactive data visualization from our perspective has a huge potential to help us with this here. And I love to use this Chinese proverb, tell me and I'll forget, is really the reporting thing we did in the past, right? Here's the stuff, make the best use of it, right? The infographics that then emerged, and we see a lot in public media, is the show me and I may remember, right? But really the involve me and I'll understand requires the interactive data visualization that we saw a lot here at this event, but really supporting, again, the expert data scientists. I didn't see a lot for really the more general audience, all the way down to students and parents that first have to understand the value of data. And so we went out with a mission to create a structured, user-centered process of transforming data into actionable insights to inform decisions. And, that's easier said than done. But the nice thing is about companies like ACT, we are kind of a microcosm of the system we are trying to impact, potentially change, of society, right? We have students, we have parents, we have scientists, we have certain demographics, and we love to eat our own dog food. And so what we did, we decided we need to advance literacy, create a talent pipeline, develop champions, create an analytics community of practice, democratize the use of data, experiment through prototypes, and ensure sustainability of such an initiative over many years. Only then can we understand, aside from our highly trained psychometricians, how we can make everybody a data analyst, everybody who touches data, which nowadays is basically everybody. And we created kind of an analytics talent pipeline where we went all the way down to high school, the more undergraduate and graduate level at universities, and internship programs, all the way to create more specialized champions that can be our advocates throughout the company in carrying that forward. And just a couple of aspects of how we did this. So we started with events and sensitizing people for the value of data. We brought experts in to teach us, and we heard about Stephen Few early on, so you try to learn from the best, right? And we developed champions, people that had already the passion around data but no way of doing it right. Because They might not have had the education, they might not have had the right tools, they might not have had the access to the data that they needed. And so over the last 2.5, 3 years, we grew our internal analytics audience beyond our psychometric and scientific experts to 3- to 4-fold. By now, more than 10% of the company is doing analytics on a daily basis, which is great, which is still not enough, I think. And then we looked at the pipeline, really the workforce development. What does it take to educate people around that? And we stress sense-making, data-driven storytelling, data and analytics literacy development, and many of those aspects. And here just a couple of examples. You know, obviously locally, and I apologize for the lack of diversity on those pictures. Our new class is much more diverse, but hey, we are in Iowa City, Iowa. Okay, so. And we started with them and used them as guinea pigs and saw what works, what doesn't work, what makes them get interested around data so that they want to start in the first place. We involved ourselves in hacking competitions that allow people to actually touch data, to overcome this issue of access. And to ensure sustainability, you don't need to read all this. This is a success assurance best practice. What it's supposed to tell you that we applied really quality assurance processes to this literacy development to make it sustainable. And we continued with those events. We brought other experts in that went beyond the following year, just data analysis of how do we effectively communicate with data. You know this guy, you're going to see him later on. And a variety of different, not only structured data, but also unstructured data, and developed a community of interest that helps us carry this forward. And many great things came out of this already. We also did competitions so that people can show the stuff and can win prizes around that, and it can be recognized by executive management for their investment into making a difference based on data. And just here a couple of new examples that came out of this. So the NCRC, the National Career Readiness Certificate, we are now, more than 2 million people in the US took that certificate. And we did visualizations around it. And now on the upper right, you see actually we can use that now for economic development. Because we know now in which states and which locations is there a certain workforce with certain skills that are certified, that certain companies might require. We can now much better assess other people in the system that contribute to our product development. Interesting aspects of analysis to look at, you know, the development of sentence ranges from early middle school all the way to the ACT test. And the surprising thing is that actually kind of in the middle you have the most diversity, and towards the end it's fading out again. Seems as if our high schoolers are less literate in this aspect than our middle schoolers, or they lost the interest in actually explaining themselves through a lot of diversity. We're looking at the voice of the customer to really understand what our customer audiences want to do, and maybe here the interesting nugget is that we all try to drive people to the web, but it's really the web chat and the phone that is much more effective than interaction through the web by itself. And then also we look even at sentiment analysis to not only know what people are saying, but how they're saying it, to see whether there's frustration or satisfaction, those types of things. So a lot of good new stuff coming out of this analytics literacy initiative that we hope, now that we understand it internally, we can now carry forward externally with our audiences and go beyond this traditional paper reporting that we have done in the past. And here's the first example, our college choice report, that tells colleges about the transitions from students, their choices that they initially make, which colleges they then go to, how they transfer from colleges, and this gives a lot of good information to colleges and especially admissions officers. This is now on Tableau Public, And so our customers can, in an interactive way, explore it. We have a survey associated with it so that we get feedback of what works for them, what doesn't work for them, and slowly but surely we will create that literacy. You can't give them too much at the beginning. You will overwhelm them and it will not be useful. So you have to start small and then see what works, what doesn't work, and tailor it to the actual customers. The next slide, more on the consumer side, data-driven storytelling. So here's, a variety of different data that we have about different states with respect to the various assessments that we do and the planned majors in planned major areas. And again, this might not be actionable enough. So can we translate it in a story like this? That is very personalized, automatically generated, and we tell people then, this is what the data means. But you also don't just want to create narratives because, people don't read anymore, right? So you want to have a combination of both. So the final product might look like something like that, where you have a narration for the people that actually want to read in combination with data that people might want to analyze or to drill down deeper. And all those things are possible today, that you automatically generate those stories for large audiences in a very personalized way. So just to end with yet another quote, the small data revolution is the real revolution. If we consider making data actionable and creating insight. Insight is not created on the large scale, it's created on the small scale. And if we have 2 minutes for questions.
Forget about metal data.
Any questions?